After Saturday's performance, it's clear that Brendan Sorsby will return in 2026 for the Bearcats.
You are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bearcats. My name is Jeff Carr, and I'm all Cincinnati all the time. I've worked in multiple university athletic departments, and I've been a season ticket holder for Bearcats football for 7 seasons now, and I'm glad that you're alongside me today. Locked On Bearcats is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Bearcats, every single day, and we want to thank you for helping us make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the country. On today's podcast, we're going to discuss the win that the Bearcats men's basketball team got on Sunday as they get ready for Louisville on Friday, and why the second half was what Wes Miller wants. We'll talk in a few minutes about the scenarios that are in front of the Bearcats and getting to Dallas and all the entanglement that they are now involved in there, because it's not a 0% chance, though it's not a good chance. We'll tell you about that in a few minutes. But we will begin with Brendan Sorsby and his performance on Saturday and why I believe that means his future remains in Clifton at least one more year. On today's podcast that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Brendan Sorsby had a rough day on Saturday. A couple of picks. Very first throw of the game was the most ill-advised throw that I've seen Brendan Sorsby make all year long. And I believe that that performance, not just that one throw, but the whole game, will lead him to return to Clifton next year. A lot has been made about his season. He has improved greatly from 2024 to 2025. We have seen a much better quarterback that makes good decisions, but it's clear he has one weakness, and it is a big, big weakness. If you play man coverage against him, he can't do anything. Or at least he is very, very limited. And I get it. There were some plays where guys dropped passes. I mean, everybody had a moment where a ball in the receiving corps, I think Joe Royer was like the only pass catcher that didn't have a drop in this game. But there were moments where every single guy had a chance where a ball hits their hands and then falls to the turf in some way, shape, or form. Some of them might have been better defense than others, but there were certainly moments that I was like, man, that catch would have changed that drive, and you might even argue it could change the game. But on top of that, there were other moments where it was just like, it just seemed like Brendan Sorsby was possibly playing against himself. I don't know. But Arizona stifled him. Arizona shut him down. The week after, Utah shut him down, and Nebraska shut him down early on this season. And one thing is clear with all of them: good man coverage. And when you get to the NFL, every single guy on every single team is capable of multiple types of coverage. Sure, there are guys that specialize in zone coverage or man coverage or whatever, but they change up the coverages multiple different times. And if you've got a guy that's coming in that clearly can carve up a zone, then you're going to play man. And if he can't carve up man, then he's not going to be scouted well. And I think that for Brendan Sorsby, there's been a lot made of this draft class for the quarterbacks coming out of college football, and that it is an opportunity to really separate yourself. But I just don't think that he has taken advantage of enough opportunities to do that. As Russ Heltman and Chad Brindle have said multiple times, he will be drafted if he goes into the draft this year, but I think especially after that game against Arizona, we're probably talking about a day 3 pick. I think there's still 3 days. Anyway, 5th round or later. And I think there's a really good chance that whatever his NIL deal is right now is probably better than what he would get as a 5th round or later draft pick in the NFL. And obviously he's going to play a lot more for the Bearcats next year than he would in the NFL. So there's so much about this that I think that it was always a little bit of a stretch to expect him to go to the draft this year, but he had played so well through that 7-game winning streak where you're thinking, man, he might have something here. But it's clear there's a huge weakness in his game. I really felt like he could have swayed this feeling totally with the final drive against Arizona, getting the ball with a minute and a half left. You need a touchdown. There's no timeouts. This is all about the quarterback, baby. How does the quarterback run this offense? And Brendan Sorsby's only completed pass on that in that moment was a screen pass. He had a couple of overthrown balls. His last ball on fourth down, it was a desperation throw already, but it was uncatchable. Nobody was going to catch that. The defense, the offense, nobody. It was on the sidelines, and he knew it too. You saw his reaction after the throw. He's smacking himself on the helmet and things like that. You could tell that he had had a rough day all around, but it just didn't feel like he made the right decisions in this game. As much as we had praised him all throughout the season, saying, man, he is such a efficient quarterback. He's limiting the turnover where he plays. He's making the right calls. When he needs to tuck in and run, he goes. There wasn't a lot of that in this game. And maybe that's credit to what Arizona was able to do, because quite frankly, the episode that I did on Friday, where I gave you 3 reasons as to why the Bearcats will win, every single one of those were wrong. And it all stemmed from the fact that Brendan Sorsby's decision-making just wasn't on point. I don't know if it was that first pass that was picked off, but even if you watch that first pass, like, he throws it to the Bearcats sideline to Cyrus Allen. Cyrus Allen is covered over top by a defender and underneath by another defender. There was no realm of reality where that ball was getting to him. And so one guy tips it, the other guy catches it. Easiest pick that Arizona's had all year. And I said that they would limit the turnovers that Arizona was able to generate. They didn't. That was still part of the game, and that was still the reason that Arizona was able to really – I mean, the score at the end of the day was within one possession, but I never really felt like the Bearcats had a hold on this. Even at halftime when they had a lead, it was like, do they though? Like, they do on the scoreboard, but as far as vibes, as far as momentum, you just never got that feeling. And it's because the offense never got going. There was never a point where Brendan Sorsby made a play to really get this thing out going, because what happened was, in the first quarter, the Bearcats had 2 major home run runs with Tawee Walker, gashing that Arizona run defense. And I'm sure that Arizona all week heard, we can't stop the run. Our defense is horrible at stopping the run. So you know what they did in the second half? They loaded the box and they dared the Bearcats to run. There were folks around me in the stands that were just like, man, why aren't the Bearcats trying to run more? It's because every time they did, they got like 1 or 2 yards, because Arizona was just absolutely crowding the box and daring Brendan Sorsby to beat them with his arm. And he never did. There were points where you thought maybe a pass would really work and really open things up, and then it would get dropped. Or it looked like a guy was coming open and Brendan Sorsby just missed him. Or there was a play where Brendan Sorsby forced it into coverage and the pick was dropped. Like, he looked like he could have had a couple more picks on top of the 2 that he already threw. And it was just a frustrating game. And I came away from that game believing, okay, Brendan Sorsby's coming back next year, because the draft stock on him had to crater after that Arizona game. And as much as I have been impressed with the advancement that he has made in his collegiate career and how his game has progressed and how he's improved, he still has this just gorilla-sized kryptonite rock that is man coverage on his shoulder. And can he figure out how to beat that? Because it does look like it's a read the defense type of thing, because we know that Brendan Sorsby loves to go through his progressions when he has time. The first, the second, the third, the fourth guy, like, he loves to go through all those progressions. But it seems as though when he sees man coverage, he just can't read that. Or at least if he can read that, he's not able to react quickly enough. I don't know what it is. I'm not a quarterback expert, unfortunately, but having watched as much football in my life as I have, it's clear that you do one thing against Brendan Sorsby and you shut him down, and that's man coverage. It's not even blitzing. Like, I think Arizona ran a few blitzes, but there weren't a ton of them. It wasn't like the Utah game. They did exactly what I thought they would do, which was they played aggressive man coverage, and they tried to get coverage sacks, which I think they only had like 1 or 2. But at the end of the day, like, they just controlled this game. And Brendan Sorsby never broke through. And I think that's why we're going to see him back next year. So with that loss, the Bearcats now have 2 conference losses, and they no longer have the whole control your destiny tag applied to them, but their chances of getting to Dallas still remain greater than 0. If you've been looking to get into the game over on FanDuel, there's no better time than right now. You can place a $5 wager for your first wager, and if it wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And there's so many great things to take a look at now within the NBA going on, NCAA basketball going on, football, all the different things, hockey even as well. And that $5 is well spent on like a money line or something like that, where you've got pretty good odds to win, because you will never find odds of placing $5, getting $300 on a bet that's like likely. Like, that's talking about like some crazy parlay stuff, turning $5 into $300. So you got to go check out FanDuel right now. I'm looking at the point spread for the Bearcats right now. It's the Bearcats are laying 7 points. I don't know how I feel about that early on in the week. Got to see some injury updates and stuff like that before I go too crazy, but that's worth monitoring as the week goes along. That's all over on FanDuel. Again, new users place a $5 wager, and if it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. Download FanDuel today. Thank you for making Locked On Bearcats part of your day. I invite you to make it part of your everyday routine. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also, if you help out the algorithm by leaving a comment, leaving a like, all that good stuff, helps Bearcats fans find the show more easily. And also, thank you for helping make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the country. Really appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun talking Bearcats athletics here on Locked On Bearcats. Also, I have Locked On Reds that I've been talking about, the Cincinnati Reds, for like 7 seasons and all that stuff. So it's been a lot of fun being part of Locked On for as long as I have. All right. 2 conference losses. The Bearcats have now found the distinction of falling into the absolute mess, the entanglement that is the 2-loss Big 12 group, which include Houston, Utah, and Arizona State. And right ahead of them is BYU and Texas Tech. Texas Tech plays West Virginia for their final game of the season. Texas Tech is off this week. Texas Tech isn't losing to West Virginia. It's just not happening. So Texas Tech is going to make the Big 12 championship. So then you look at a couple of different things, what the Bearcats need to do to get to Dallas now. Last week, the mantra was win out, and then you don't have to worry about anything. But they lost to Arizona. Now they have to worry about stuff. They have to win out still. They still have to beat BYU and TCU. That would knock BYU down into the 2-loss conference pool, which then Cincinnati would have the tiebreaker over. They also need Utah, Houston, and Arizona State to lose. I don't necessarily know what the tiebreaker thing, and we'll talk with Chad Brindle tomorrow a lot more in depth about this, because I don't have the tiebreaker understanding past the, head-to-head and just overall record bit down when it comes to teams that they didn't play, like Arizona State and Houston. But I know this: Kansas State has to beat Utah this week. Utah holds the head-to-head tiebreaker, and when you look at their remaining schedule, they've got Kansas State and Kansas. And it just doesn't feel like as much as we were happy. And I think it was partially because of our own expectations and partially because we just weren't sure what this team was going to be. But when the Bearcats beat Kansas earlier on this season, that felt like a big win, but it just isn't. Kansas isn't that good this year. Iowa State's not even that good this year. Baylor's not that good. Oklahoma State's a train wreck, all this other stuff. So the Bearcats' big chances to make statements with wins against teams like Arizona and Utah have gone by the wayside. They now need to beat BYU and TCU to get into the championship game, but also just to have those resume wins that we thought the earlier wins were. And those teams just did the Bearcats no favors. But looking at this week, Kansas State plays Utah. Houston hosts TCU. Utah is also hosting Kansas State. Both those games at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And then you have Colorado hosting Arizona State. So I don't love the chances for an Arizona State loss this week because Colorado's bad. But there's a chance that TCU and Kansas State can help out the Bearcats a little bit. Kansas State maybe less so, but they're not a horrible team. They are 17.5-point underdogs to Utah. So maybe they play the disrespected card. I'm not really sure. But the Bearcats have opened themselves up to all of this. All right, you have to scheme it this way, you have to look at it here, and you have to understand this and that and the other. And it just kind of feels like they have put themselves behind the 8 ball as far as getting to Dallas. So you will be you will be forgiven if you're the one that's sitting there just like, it ain't gonna happen. I mean, why we got to worry about this? But I'll tell you this, there's still scenarios that it could take place. I wonder a little bit though, because looking at how the Bearcats have played in their bigger games, it feels as though there's been a lot more pressure on the defense, and that's why they've gotten exposed. One way or the other, obviously Arizona didn't blow them out by any stretch of the imagination, but there were times where you needed a stop, where you needed them to not, get a field goal or something, which to the special teams credit, and Logan Wilson had that awesome block field goal in the second quarter. But you can't block field goals every single time, although that would be phenomenal. So the defense has to do something, but it just feels like the defense allows teams to march down into field goal range rather easily. We've talked a lot about the red zone defense of the Bearcats this year and how they are able to do the whole bend but don't break thing. But if you face a team that has a decent field goal kicker, which at the time Iowa State didn't have any field goal kickers because they were all hurt. You didn't really have a good field goal kicker from Kansas in that game. I think they had an injury too. I forget how that one was going. It feels like it's been 82 years or whatever that gif is. But I feel like where you play those tighter matchups where it does feel like a field goal can really swing things one way or the other, the Bearcats are giving up a lot of field goals or a lot of opportunities to get those field goals. So that's the tough part where it's like, okay, when they get to Dallas, what happens? But they got to beat BYU first. Now, I love the fact that we get Nip at night on Saturday against BYU. Huge matchup, big noon, Fox's big noon football kickoff show is going to be in Clifton, talking all about the game and stuff like that. So that's going to be a fun day. But overall, like, the more that we've seen the pressure on this team, the more focus has been put on this team. We just haven't quite seen that 7-game winning streak side of the Bearcats. We've seen a much more timid, a much more conservative, a much more two-dimensional Bearcats team, because Brendan Sorsby just there wasn't a lot of scrambling in the game for him last week. And that really kind of surprised me. That was something that Russ Heltman and I talked a lot about on Thursday's show, where it was like, it feels as though this is what needs to happen for the Bearcats to win. But all in total, he had 9 carries. I thought he'd have 15 or more. But statistically, I think that sacks do count in that. So there were a couple of those. But overall, like that just seems like something we didn't see. We didn't see that wrinkle that they were able to add against some other teams. And maybe that was just because they were taking advantage of the bad schedule and they were taking advantage of teams like Oklahoma State that, I don't know if you saw this or not, but last week Oklahoma State benched a lot of starters that were playing against UC. They actually played Kansas State pretty tough. Kansas State still ended up winning, but they only scored 2 touchdowns in the game. But overall, like I didn't see, and I haven't seen, the Bearcats that we were so accustomed to for several weeks beforehand. The Utah game and the Arizona game, that version of the Bearcats didn't show up. So what version of the Bearcats shows up against BYU, shows up against TCU? Then we worry about the tiebreakers, right? As much as, scoreboard watching and all that stuff will happen, and I'm definitely going to be scoreboard watching and seeing exactly what's going on in those other games with Houston and with Utah and with Arizona State. The Bearcats also have to take care of business on their end, and so far they haven't. So that's going to be the tough thing. But you know what? Let's switch gears here, because there was a winning Bearcats team this weekend as the men's basketball team beat Mount St. Mary's, and it was all about the second half. The next time you try to get down to a Bearcats football game, basketball game, maybe you're going to a Cyclones hockey game or wherever it is that you're going event-wise, Game Time's got you covered for your next ticket purchase. And in fact, looking at Game Time, looks like right now the cheapest ticket, at least as far as if you're buying 2 tickets, there's a pair of tickets in the south end zone for $93 to the Bearcats and BYU this Saturday night. Game Time has these great last minute deals, but the awesome part about it is they show the all-in pricing up front before you ever put your ticket in your cart. So you don't have to guess on what sort of fees will get added or if taxes are going to make that ticket purchase just look ridiculous. Game Time's going to show it all to you before you ever make a decision because they try to make the ticket buying process much more simpler than with other places. You got to check out Game Time today. Download the app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. I encourage you to keep the conversation going with me after the show is over. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, and you can also follow me on TikTok at that same username. I'm on Instagram as well. You just flip the username. It's Carr Jeff with 3 Fs. And you can follow the show at LO_Bearcats on Twitter and at Locked On Bearcats, all one word, on TikTok and Instagram. The Bearcats got another win on Sunday, now 4-0 after beating Mount St. Mary's 72-55, and it was a bit concerning at halftime, the fact that they were trailing. But the second half, they really took off, and in the postgame presser, Wes Miller even said as much like the final 12 minutes of the second half was exactly what they want to do. He said, quote, "The last 12 minutes of the game was Cincinnati basketball." Because this year they've set the roster up where they want to play fast, score fast, shoot threes, and force a lot of turnovers on defense. The defense continues to just absolutely stymie people. And as much as Mount St. Mary's had a guy that scored 13 points in the first half, there was a great thing in that the Bearcats were able to put Buck Harris on him in the second half and really shut him down. Talking about Xavier Lipscomb for Mount St. Mary's. Dude was going off in the first half and then was nowhere to be found in the second half because of Buck Harris. But that game really turned in the second half with a couple of key plays. Dede Thomas making a hustle play here and there. You had some great post play on both sides of the floor in the second half from Baba Miller and Moustapha Cham. That's really what's going to key in everything that the Bearcats want to do, because if they get out rebounded and they're not able to hit those outlet passes and get going down the floor, then moving fast is a moot point. But also, you're looking at a couple of different things that the Bearcats were able to do in this game and get the win, even with some bad days from Kirk Kriisa. Kirk Kriisa shot 1 for 9 from the floor. That's not going to happen in a lot of games. He's going to have better shooting games. Sean Abayev, 3 for 11. He's going to shoot better than that. 0 for 6 from 3. This team's going to shoot threes, and they were 6 for 29 as a team from the floor. And as Wes Miller said in his postgame, he's like, we want to shoot threes. Our identity on offense, aside from the tempo, is shooting threes, which is a very refreshing thing to think about Bearcats basketball anyway. But the fact that that's the plan and they just quite weren't there on Sunday afternoon, it's still great to see that they get the win. And I get it. Mount St. Mary's is quite below the level that UC is. And the fact that UC even trailed in this game kind of feels a little bit annoying, but ultimately they got the result they were looking for. And it's still another tune-up. This early in the season, you're just not I'm going to keep saying it till I'm blue in the face. You're not going to see the best version of Cincinnati basketball, nor should you. You should never see the best version of a college basketball team in early November, because if you do, that's a bad sign. If somebody just takes off before Thanksgiving, what's going to happen in March with that team? I don't think it's possible with the way that they've situated the schedule in college basketball for somebody to start at the top of their game, remain at the top of their game, and never, decline. So you have to build up. And right now the Bearcats are building up. that was something that was impressive to see, that after the first half of struggles and after the first half of kind of getting kicked in the teeth a little bit, they were able to bounce back. There were some great conversations with Dede Thomas and Moustapha Cham after the game and the pressers and things like that. And, Dede was just talking about, like, we're just working and doing our thing. We keep getting better each and every day. Moustapha Cham is kind of taking on a role that he didn't see at UCF, where he's much more of a focal point on offense. And so he's still getting a little bit used to that, but you can start to see the wheels turning a little bit. Just 3 Bearcats in double figures in the game. Dede led all scorers with 16 points. Then you had Baba Miller and Moustapha Cham with 13, but both Baba and Moustapha and Moo, as they call him, Moo for short, both Baba and Moo had a double-double, 13 points, 11 rebounds for Baba Miller, 13 points, 10 rebounds for Moustapha Cham. And I think that's what they need to see. But the best part about those guys, man, and this is where I love basketball, is the guys who just go down the box score. They fill every part of it. 4 blocks for both guys each, four blocks each for the 2 post guys, 3 steals from Baba Miller, 2 steals from Moustapha Cham. Just absolutely turn that defense up to 11 for both guys. And this is going to make a huge difference against Louisville. I'm not saying that the Bearcats have a good shot. It's going to be as optimistic and as much as I love this team, as optimistic as I can be, it kind of feels like a snowball's chance in hell that they're going to beat Louisville. But if that happens, it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be Baba Miller and Moustapha Cham going to be a huge reason why. And think of this too. In these games, because there's going to be some conference games where it feels like they're just clearly overmatched. In those games, if the Bearcats shoot better than 21% from 3, I mean, they shot 21% from 3. And they scored 72 points. It feels like in years past, if you said at some point that the Bearcats shot 21% from somewhere on the floor, they were just scoring 50 and they were getting boat raced by whoever it was they were playing. This team is so much more talented that they can overcome that. And part of the reason was they got some nice games off the bench from Keyshawn Tillery and some nice minutes, albeit he only scored 1 point, but a good 10 minutes from Aveline Gellat. So I would love to see some more from this team. And Louisville's going to be tough on Friday. We're going to talk a lot more about that with Chad Brendel and Russ Heltman as the week goes along. But I love to see that they were able to get this win, not having their best stuff, but able to pull out the win in the non-conference against Mount St. Mary's. I still feel bullish on my prediction that the Bearcats will make the tournament. Because, again, we were not seen anywhere close to the best that this team can play. But defense travels. Defense sticks with you, and this team's defense is still phenomenal. I do wonder a little bit if they will get exposed against Louisville. Louisville being one of the best teams. Louisville is probably a national championship contender. So this is going to be a huge barometer test for them on Friday night against U of L. But I think that going into it, I don't feel as though it's just going to be them getting smashed because they're completely overmatched. Got a lot of talent. They can make that game interesting at points. And I'm excited to see how it goes. Love the fact that the Bearcats were able to turn it on in the second half against Mount St. Mary's and get the dub. Give us something. Give us a win for the weekend, because it just felt like Saturday took the wind out of the sails, right? Like that game, from the word go, Nippert was stunned because the very first play of the game, Brendan Sorsby throws a pick. And at that moment, and then it was like 3 plays later and Arizona had their touchdown. And it just felt like the air had been let out of everything. And they never quite got it back. There were some plays, and even after they took the lead, you're like, okay, this feels right. And then they just stopped. So to see the basketball team get the win has me feeling a little bit better. We'll see what this weekend holds, because no men's basketball until Friday. Of course, football Saturday night against BYU. We're going to have you covered every single day here on Locked On Bearcats. Make sure that you follow the podcast if you're not already doing so, and make sure that you comment and like and help out the algorithm and all that good stuff. Helps folks find us easier. Now, make sure you go check out Locked On Big 12 as Drake Tolles got you covered for the most exciting conference in all of college sports. From the championship game to the rivalry game and everything in between, find Locked On Big 12 everywhere you get your podcast. They're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, just like Locked On Bearcats. We're your team every day, and you know that we'll be talking Bearcats right here every day. So we'll see you tomorrow.